I have the money right here. Sir, step back right now. She won't even look at it.
I told him I can't take it.
Just calm down and explain it to me. I'm just trying to pay for my stuff.
Here is something almost no cashier has ever been trained to explain to you, and most of them do not fully understand it themselves. When a store says, "We do not accept cash here," there are actually two very different legal situations that could be true, and knowing which one you are in changes what you can actually do next. If you want to know the difference before it costs you a purchase, a meal, or a parking spot, stay with me, because this takes just a few minutes to learn, and it applies almost everywhere you spend money. Every dollar bill you have ever held says right on it that it is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Most people assume that phrase means a business has to accept it. Consumer attorneys who track this issue say that assumption is wrong, and it surprises almost everyone. Legal tender only guarantees that cash is a valid way to settle a debt that already exists. It does not force a private business to agree to sell you something for cash in the first place, the same way a store is not required to accept a personal check or a specific credit card. In the United States, there is no federal law requiring most private businesses to accept cash at all. What changes the picture is that a number of states and cities have passed their own laws requiring certain retailers to accept it. And this is exactly where most people get confused, because the rule genuinely depends on where you happen to be standing. So here's the one detail that tells you what is really going on. Instead of quietly putting your cash away, ask this: is this a store-wide policy, or is there a specific issue today that is preventing cash? That is it. You are not accusing anyone of anything. You are simply asking the cashier to tell you which of the two situations you are actually in. If it is a genuine store-wide policy that is generally allowed for private businesses across most of the United States, unless you happen to be in one of the specific states or cities that require cash acceptance, which is worth knowing if you live somewhere that has passed one of these laws. But if there is no real policy and the refusal is because a drawer is short on change or a system is having a temporary issue, that is an entirely different situation, and it usually resolves itself in a few minutes if you simply ask. Now here is a version of this same insider detail that almost nobody outside the retail industry knows. Some businesses that genuinely refuse cash are doing so for a documented safety reason, often tied to robbery prevention policies that some retailers quietly adopt, especially at night or in certain locations. This is not something posted on a sign, and cashiers are rarely told to explain it, because doing so can feel like admitting a security concern out loud. If a cashier seems hesitant or vague about why cash is not accepted, rather than confidently citing a clear store policy, that hesitation itself is useful information. It usually means the answer is more specific than a simple universal rule, and asking to speak briefly with a manager will typically get you a clearer answer than pressing the cashier further. This same insider knowledge applies to restaurants too, in a slightly different form. If a restaurant is cash only or card only, and this was not made clear before you sat down and ordered, attorneys who handle consumer disputes say that in most places, a business is expected to make its accepted payment methods reasonably clear before you commit to a purchase that cannot simply be undone, like a meal you have already eaten. If you find yourself at the end of a meal without the accepted payment method, asking to speak with a manager calmly rather than assuming there are no options very often reveals more flexibility than the situation first appears to have, because restaurants generally do not want an unresolved payment dispute at a table any more than you do. And for parking garages and toll systems that have shifted to card only or license plate billing, here is the insider detail that solves this particular version of the problem almost instantly. Nearly every one of these systems has an intercom or call button built in specifically for situations like this. precisely because it comes up regularly enough that operators plan for it. Attorneys who deal with these disputes say the fix is simple. Use the intercom, calmly explain you only have cash, and ask what the process is. Many locations have a manual override or an attendant on call for exactly this reason, even though it rarely feels that way when you are the one sitting there with cars waiting behind you. Let us walk through both versions of the main scenario so you can hear the difference clearly. Bad way. The cashier says, "We do not accept cash." The customer, feeling embarrassed and aware of the line behind them, quietly puts the cash away, apologizes, and either abandons the purchase or scrambles for another payment method on the spot. Good way. The cashier says, "We do not accept cash." The customer asks whether this is a store-wide policy or a specific issue today. The cashier confirms it is a genuine policy. The customer, now understanding clearly instead of guessing, calmly decides whether to use a different payment method, step aside without pressure, or simply remember this for next time. If you are watching this from Europe, this same insider knowledge applies to you too, just with a different legal foundation. Several European countries actually have stronger protections around the acceptance of cash than the United States does, because cash carries a more enforceable status as legal tender in parts of the European Union. Even so, individual shops can sometimes still set their own practical policies, often tied to safety or limited change on hand, particularly in smaller businesses. The same fix applies no matter which country you are in. Ask calmly whether this is a policy or a temporary issue, because the answer determines what your realistic options actually are. It is also worth understanding briefly why this confusion is so widespread in the first place, because that is the detail that makes the whole habit worth building. Most people assume payment rules are the same everywhere, uniform and simple, the way a speed limit sign is the same shape no matter what state you are in. Payment acceptance rules are nothing like that. They are a patchwork of federal guidance, state law, city ordinances, and individual business policy layered on top of each other, and almost none of it is explained to the average customer standing at a register. That patchwork is exactly why the same situation, a store refusing cash, can be completely legal in one city and against local law 2 states away, and why the only reliable way to know which situation you are in is to simply ask. Here is one more insider detail worth knowing before you ever run into this situation. In places that do require cash acceptance by law, the requirement is often tied specifically to posted signage. Some of these local laws state that a business must accept cash unless a clear sign is posted at the entrance or near the register stating otherwise, meaning the absence of a sign can itself be relevant if you ever need to raise the issue. This is a small detail that almost never comes up in casual conversation, but consumer attorneys who have handled disputes in cities with these laws say it is often the very first thing they check, because it turns a vague disagreement about policy into a simple factual question. Was a sign posted or was it not? This also connects to something else worth knowing: the difference between a store simply preferring card payments and a store legally requiring them. Many businesses now encourage card or contactless payment because it is faster and reduces the amount of cash kept on site, which is a legitimate business reason even where cash acceptance laws exist. In most of these cases, businesses are not trying to break any rule, they are simply optimizing for speed and safety. And a polite question is usually all it takes to find out whether there is any flexibility in the moment, since many cashiers are given more discretion than the posted policy might suggest. Think about how often you carry cash for exactly this kind of moment: a tip, a small purchase, a backup in case a card reader is down. Each one of those moments is a small chance for this exact confusion to come up. And most of the time it never does. Cash is simply accepted without a second thought. But across a year of these small moments, the odds of running into a refusal add up, and knowing the right calm question to ask in that moment is what turns an awkward pause into a quick, clear answer. 3 things worth remembering from all of this. First, pause before quietly putting your cash away, whether you are at a register, a restaurant, or a parking gate. Second, ask whether it is a genuine store-wide policy or a temporary issue, since this one question tells you almost everything you need to know. Third, if you are ever unsure whether a refusal matches the law where you live, a quick note of the date and location is what makes any follow-up conversation with a consumer protection office effective later. This exact pattern repeats constantly across stores, restaurants, and parking systems everywhere, and it is rarely explained clearly to the person standing there holding their cash. This is not about assuming a business is doing something wrong. Most of the time, there is a completely reasonable explanation behind it. It is about making sure a moment of confusion never quietly turns into you walking away from a purchase, a meal, or a parking spot simply because nobody paused long enough to ask. If this helped, consider subscribing, because this channel breaks down exactly these kinds of everyday moments, one at a time, so you always know what to say before you need it. This video is for general education only and is not personalized legal advice for your specific situation. And if you found this helpful, go back and watch the earlier video on what to do when a store rejects your cash and refuses to let you pay any other way either, because it covers a closely related and even more frustrating version of this same moment.